vNICs or virtual network interface cards on your virtual machines are what allow the virtual machines to communicate with the virtual switch and thus with other virtual machines or even out onto the physical network. And now let's go over into the vSphere client and I'll show you just how easy it is to add, configure, and remove virtual NICs on a vSphere standard switch. Now for this demonstration, I've added a new virtual machine here called Windows Server 2019, and this actually already has Windows Server 2019 loaded. And I did this because at the Wide Brain Coffee Company, what they want to do is to use vSphere to demonstrate how you can create multiple virtual NICs on a virtual machine because they have an application that requires multiple IP addresses. And eventually, as you'll see later in this module, they'll need those multiple virtual network interface cards to connect to multiple port groups on the same virtual switch. So when we talk about creating new virtual NICs on a virtual switch, it's actually a little bit misleading because you don't actually create virtual NICs on the virtual switch. The virtual switch has a maximum of 4,096 virtual ports, and they're created by default on a vSphere standard switch. So you don't actually have to create a virtual port, and you don't create the virtual NIC on the virtual switch. Instead, what you do is when you create a virtual machine, like this virtual machine we have here, and you go into the settings for that virtual machine, you can see the number of virtual network adapters or virtual NICs that this virtual machine has, and specifically which port group this virtual network adapter or virtual NIC is connected to. So in our case, if we want to add a new virtual NIC, we simply add a new device on this virtual machine, go down to Network, and click here to add a new virtual network adapter. So here under Network Adapter 1, you see the original network adapter, and now we have this new network, which has an asterisk by it, which tells us that this hasn't been saved yet. And it's here that we would connect this new vNIC to whichever port group we choose. Now you can see that this is already connected to the virtual switch, and it will be connected at power on. Now vSphere even offers 3 different types of virtual network adapters, with the default being the E1000 Enhanced. With our new virtual network adapter or virtual NIC added, we'll click OK. And now if we go back into Edit the Settings, you can see we have Network Adapter 1 and Network Adapter 2, both of them being connected to the same port group, in this case, the VM network. If we go into the console for this virtual machine, it's important to know that just because you added a new virtual NIC, that doesn't mean that your operating system automatically recognizes it and can use it. Just like any other device added to an operating system, it's likely that you might need drivers for that device, and you might need to perform some sort of configuration. Now, in this case, if we go in Windows down to the network adapter configuration, into our network and internet settings, and look at our network properties, you can see we have one Ethernet adapter called Ethernet 0, and I can tell you that this was here already. It's configured via DHCP, and it has an IP address which is .148. If we scroll down, we now have a new network adapter called Ethernet 1. This is also configured via DHCP, and it has an IP address of .109. So in this case, when the new virtual network interface card was added to this running virtual machine, the driver was available in Windows, and it automatically receives an IP address via DHCP. So there's no configuration to be done on this virtual network interface card. We do have 2 different virtual networks connected, as you can see here, both with IP addresses, and at this point they're connected to the same port group on the same virtual switch. As far as configuration of those virtual network interface cards, of course that's done on a per virtual machine basis on each virtual network adapter. We can also see how our virtual machine with 2 virtual NICs is connected here to vSwitch Zero's VM network. There are some basic settings available to us. MAC address, and adapter type, but not too much more. At a higher level, you can configure settings at a port group level, which we'll talk about later in this module. When it comes to removing a virtual network adapter, of course, that too is easy to do. If I go to Network Adapter 2, which is the new vNIC we added, and click the X right here, the device will be removed when I click OK, and that vNIC is gone from the virtual machine. And we can even verify that over here in the virtual switch configuration. So that's how easy it is to create, configure, and remove virtual network interface cards on a vSphere standard switch.